From the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Coming up on AgDay.
Local labor doesn't want to milk cows.
Lawmakers get an earful about the dairy industry. U.S. and Chinese officials back to the negotiating table for trade talk.
We hope to make substantial progress in these 2 meetings.
And our top story, could rebuilding the nation's infrastructure be the thing that brings Washington together?
We did come to one agreement, that the agreement would be big and bold.
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Congressional Democrats say they've reached an agreement with President Trump on a $2 trillion infrastructure deal. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer meeting with the president. The Democratic leaders urging the president to support a big and bold infrastructure package that goes beyond transportation, but they disagree over how to pay for it and what exactly would be included. The U.S. in 2017 had an estimated $836 billion backlog of highway and bridge capital needs.
We agreed on a number, which was very, very good, $2 trillion for infrastructure. Originally, we had started a little lower. Even the president was eager to push it up to $2 trillion. And that is a very good thing. And then we talked about a number of things we would do. Obviously, the roads and the bridges and the highways, obviously water, but also a big emphasis on broadband, that every American home, we believe, needs broadband, an emphasis on the power grid so we could bring clean energy from one end of the country to the other, and several other issues.
Ranking member of the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, Sam Graves, says linking infrastructure work to action on the Highway Trust Fund could help.
Well, we're working on that. We don't necessarily have an idea how we fund it yet, and we don't know what the size is. Personally, I think it's got to be, at $500 billion or less, south of $500 billion. There are some that talk $1 trillion. I don't think we can ever get there to $1 trillion, but we have to figure out how to fund it, and we're looking at everything's on the table. We also have to solve the Highway Trust Fund, the gas tax issue, so they'll probably be tied in together on how we solve that problem too.
You think one idea about how to pay for the repairs, the nation's top business groups and labor unions have said they would support increasing the federal fuel tax, currently at 18.3 cents a gallon since it was last raised back in 1993.
The I80 Planning Tour, brought to you by the Enlist Weed Control System. More weed control, less drift and volatility, maximum yield potential.
According to USDA, Iowa is making real strides getting crops planted. About a fifth of corn is now in the ground. That's just a few points behind the 5-year average and ahead of last year. 3% of soybeans are planted, which is right on par. But farmers in western Iowa along the Missouri River continue to have issues post-flood. Betsy Gibbon takes us there for today's I80 Planning Tour.
But it shouldn't be this hard. We struggle. That's what's hard.
Chest-high water sits on the Missouri River bottoms, a site that's common for Don Reef and Crescent, Iowa.
There's about 600 acres here up to the interstate that we probably won't get any of this planted.
A victim of a flood which did not spare farm communities. Water on these acres rising again weeks after, blanketing the ground once more.
With our breached levees, a lot of the ground is flooded again.
It's been a tough couple of years for farmers near Crescent, Iowa. Flooding happening several times, even last year. The last major flood was in 2011.
Since 2011, on our 10-year average, we've probably taken 3 zeros on some of this ground.
Flooding year to year, becoming the norm for Reef, but creating different financial setbacks.
And the Corps of Engineers, the relationship between farmer and the Corps is eroded.
The Corps says enormous inflows came from every major tributary that enters the Missouri River, from Niobrara, Nebraska, to even the Platte.
Even when farmers are able to plant, they'll be cleaning up for a while, and for some, that's cleaning up busted bins.
And then there's moldy corn under it.
Busted bins, 7 of them, with no salvageable grain.
I'll tell you what, it was hot in here. You'd fall over if you didn't have a drink.
The grain not covered under federal crop insurance.
I'm very hopeful that we can get that damaged grain piece that I talked about, that we can get that included in a disaster package.
As far as Reef's other acres, he's waiting to put on inputs until he's sure the ground won't flood again.
All of that water needs to come, and all that snow needs to melt and still come south. And so the risk for flood yet this year is not passed.
Which could be another financial blow.
It may be 30% of the cost, and it's hard to put $60 worth of anhydrous ammonia on the ground and put $100 worth of corn on the ground per every acre and know that maybe in 3 weeks this might be under 3 foot of water.
But he's getting ready to plant, knowing acres are likely to change.
I see us starting to plant maybe in a few days. I don't know if I'll take delivery of it all. A lot of our acres will change. It's going to be on the fly.
A move onward as grain sits idle.
Well, I'm 51 years old, okay? I might have some sidelines, but this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my time.
Because the love of this profession was not buried with it. Reporting in Crescent, Iowa, I'm Betsy Gibbon.
Getting the fields ready to plant can be quite a process, as meteorologist Cindy Clausen shows us in today's Crop Comment. Cindy.
Well, Clinton, one of the bigger jobs that seems like it's never ending is removing rocks from the field. But usually they aren't this big. Check this out. This picture was shared by a guy who goes by Deer Runner on Twitter. He lives in Beaver County, that's in Alberta, Canada, and he tweeted a quote, "Found a small one." Yeah, just check out the size of this thing. It's amazing. More like a boulder. Whew, well, looks like he was able to get that out, and best of luck if you have any more like that. Let's take a look at our wind speed forecast, and as we head through the day today, it's a lot going to be in the Great Lakes region into the eastern Corn Belt. That's where our heavier winds will be, and then trailing into the cold front as you get down into the southern plains and into the Four Corners region. Overnight, things slacking off for the most part, except for right in the middle of the country. You still have a frontal system that's going to be draped through there, and you'll see winds kind of picking up along it, and then also starting to pick up in parts of the northern plains and northern high plains as another system approaches out of Canada. I'll have more on your national forecast coming up a little bit later on, but for now, here are some hometown temps.
Introducing Farm Journal TV, on demand 24/7. AgDay, Machinery Pete TV. U.S. Farm Report on your phone and tablet. Download the Farm Journal TV mobile app today.
Happening right now, U.S. and Chinese officials are meeting again today in Beijing, continuing work toward a possible trade deal. Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin saying he hopes substantial progress would be made in the talks. Mnuchin telling reporters the Vice Premier of China will be coming back to Washington next week to continue the work.
Are discussions on subsidies going to be on the table?
I'm not going to comment on specific issues of the discussions. They've been quite broad, as I've said before. We've made a lot of progress. We look forward to the meetings.
Mnuchin telling Fox Business News they hope within these next 2 rounds of talks to be at the point where they can either recommend to the president that they have a deal or make a recommendation that they don't. Could more aid be on the way to producers impacted by the trade tiff with China? It depends on who you ask in Washington right now. National Economic Council Director Larry Kudlow telling reporters the administration has allocated $12 billion to farm assistance, and he says they stand ready to do more if necessary. But while in Iowa on Monday, Ag Secretary Sonny Perdue countered that. The Des Moines Register reporting, Perdue said there could possibly be some miscommunication. Now, Perdue has repeatedly ruled out a new round of aid for this year's crops. The House Ag Committee got an earful about the state of the dairy industry on Tuesday. Dairy farmers and industry leaders alike sharing testimony about the difficulties in the industry, with concerns over trade and labor dominating the conversation. Now, one dairy farmer who testified was Mike McMahon of New York State. McMahon saying in January of 2000, he replaced half his crew with Hispanic workers and instantly saw a change, saying not only did turnover stop, but he said the migrant workers have a work ethic, animal handling skills, and respect for coworkers and owners that seem to be lost on the local workforce.
While it is not this committee's jurisdiction, immigrant labor is absolutely critical to my operation. Regardless of the unemployment rate in our county, local labor doesn't want to milk cows. A 2017 Texas A&M study found that 79% of the U.S. milk supply is harvested by Hispanic workers. Agriculture needs a way to secure an immigrant workforce that is steady, willing, able, and legal.
The president and CEO of California Dairies also touched on trade agreements, saying that open markets and lower trade barriers are crucial to the dairy industry's long-term economic health. Now, one of those important trade deals for dairy is USMCA. Mexico's legislature is moving ahead with a portion of the new U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement. It has approved new labor reform legislation called for under the deal. Meanwhile, the Trump administration continues to work with Congress to get the plan approved here.
The next step on the USMCA agreement to replace NAFTA is for the White House to present to the House Ways and Means and the Senate Finance Committee a rough draft or a statement of administrative action. And so we'll take that, we'll have 30 days to look through their rough draft, make some recommendations back on particular wording, and then send that back to the White House. And then they'll incorporate that and craft up a final wording document for the bill to bring to us.
Estes says ideally Congress would like to be wrapped up with USMCA before August. When prices aren't good, a lot of grain ends up in the bin. So what now? Prices are still soft. We'll talk about that next at the Agribusiness Desk. And later, from stable to street and back again, this self-sufficient German resident has made a name for herself. Details in the market. Slow corn and spring wheat planting could mean more farmers decide to plant soybeans, and that's weighing heavy on markets right now. We get the latest from the CME.
We've been under pressure for most of the day, even though we were a little bit higher in the night session, especially for corn. But, the momentum really faded very quickly. You look at the 10-day weather forecast, and there's really not a whole lot of opportunity to get out there and get planting in a lot of areas. So I think this problem is going to continue to compound as far as being behind on planting, and at some point it could really be the spark that will start to get the funds out of this record large short position. So for me, I think that we are getting to the point where corn is cheap enough. We're very oversold in corn, soybeans, and wheat, and I think there's some upside potential coming.
Brian Vassing, Advanced Trading, our guest at the Agribusiness Desk today. Brian, let's talk about maybe something we don't want to discuss, but it's that grain sitting in the bin while our markets seem to be kind of losing the bottom here. Talk about that and what you're hearing from producers and maybe some strategies.
In my travels this winter and spring, Clinton, we've seen a lot of indication that there's a fair amount of old crop corn and maybe even a fair amount of old crop beans still in the country. So we're really strongly encouraging producers to get control of those bushels. And by that we mean no one likes to sell after this sharp of a drop, but if there is instances where your basis is favorable, you've had a nice improvement in the basis, you're going to the field, whatever the case may be, need some cash flow, strongly encourage you to have some ownership or re-ownership of those bushels on paper. You can do it conservatively, for example, with a purchase of a September call option, for example, but get control of that old crop because the equity is too high to let the market get away from us on the downside.
Yeah, and that is a risk. I mean, it's basically money sitting in the bin, and I know that people often say to you, well, I can't go any lower, can it? But there's a lot of uncertainty at this point.
There certainly is, Clinton, and the phrase we like to use occasionally is markets have a horrible sense of humor. Markets they're not concerned about whether or not we think it can go lower. They basically sets its mind to doing what it's going to do, and in this case it's set a bearish tone. So rather than turn the control over to the market, take control yourself and really look at to get control of these old crop bushels so you can turn your focus to new crop.
Yeah, and we do have a lot to focus on the new crop. Brian, appreciate it. Thank you for being here as always. We'll be back for more Ag Day coming up in just a minute.
To talk with Brian one-on-one, call Advanced Trading at 800-664-2314 or head online to advanced-trading.com. Your next piece of equipment is on MachineryPete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on MachineryPete.com.
Welcome back to Ag Day. Here with meteorologist Cindy Clausen. Look at the root zone moisture map. And Cindy, what stood out the most to you? Because we can tell where it's still pretty wet.
Oh, obviously, and we're going to be seeing this change a lot in the next week or so because of all the rain that we are seeing this week. But one thing that really stood out to me was especially around the Four Corners region, especially for folks in Arizona. Let's take a look. Where it really stood out to me was right here in Arizona, also into Colorado, Utah. It's also drier up in parts of the Northwest as well. We did improve in western Texas, but we're starting to get a little bit dry in parts of the central Gulf Coast states and also into the southeast. Those are areas that we will certainly be watching. Looking at the weather today, we still have some wet weather in the nation's midsection, rain into the Great Lakes, even a bit of snow in our far northern reaches there up in the upper Great Lakes. Trailing frontal system will bring showers and thunderstorms back through the plains. Still some snow, though, as you get into parts of Wyoming and Colorado as well. Heading through the day today, we're going to be seeing everything still moving off to the east. Showers and thunderstorms. Some of those could be a bit on the strong side. You'll see that continuing down into parts of Texas as well. And then as we get into the overnight hours, we continue to see the second low then starting to push up towards the Great Lakes area into the Corn Belt. You're going to see some more heavy rain there. Through the day on Thursday, more showers and thunderstorms are going to continue, and we're going to see everything keep pushing off to the east. And there's that next system that's going to be coming into parts of the northwestern United States. Now, as far as that precipitation estimate, man, we've had a lot of it already, over 4 inches in some spots. And when you add the next 24 hours, it's going to be a lot of these same areas, but we're going to expand it more to the north and south and to the east as well. Heavy rain in parts of Texas on into Arkansas. And again, we expand it north all the way up to Michigan. So the nation's midsection, just a wet mess over the next 24 hours. And yeah, some of that still snow over, especially in some of those higher elevations in the mountains. Here's a look at temperatures. Still really warm in a lot of the country. You can see the cooler air on the back side of that front. Overnight, we're going to see those temperatures diving down into the 30s and even some 20s on the back side of that as you get into some of those higher elevations there. Still pretty mild in the south and southeast. And then we start to warm up a little bit in the the northern plains, but we start to cool down just a little bit on the eastern side of there as well. Jet stream shows that trough that is going to be moving through the country, kind of flattening out just a little bit. And as we get into the weekend, more of a zonal flow, but we start to see more of a trough out in the west as well, and that'll start to push east as we get into next week. That's your national forecast. Now let's check on the weather where you live. Culver, Oregon, warm with plenty of sunshine today and a high of 61 degrees. Carbondale, Kansas, showers and thunderstorms, especially as we get into tonight. 66 for your high and 75 in Clyde, Ohio with showers and storms.
Burger King made its name on the Whopper. Now it's remaking its iconic sandwich. And later, take a stroll in this historic German town and you might just have an unusual companion. That's today on In the Country.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Burger King's Meatless Impossible Whopper is now going nationwide. The Impossible Whopper is made with plant-based patties. They are designed to look and taste like meat. It's topped with tomatoes, lettuce, mayo, ketchup, pickles, and onions. They have 15% less fat, 90% less cholesterol than regular Whoppers, and 100% less beef. Now, it was test marketed at 59 Burger King locations in the St. Louis area. An effort to cut food waste has taken hold in a city known for excess, Las Vegas. Some of the city's world-famous casinos in recent years have developed and expanded practices to cut back on the thousands of tons of leftover and uneaten food they send to the landfill each year. Businesses are now turning food scraps into compost or shipping them to a farm to feed thousands of pigs. They're donating expired mini bar snacks to community groups, and they're giving excess banquet meals to a food bank. The EPA honored MGM's Bellagio Casino Resort last month for sending tons of food waste to a pig farm north of Las Vegas, and also for diverting oyster shells to Chesapeake Bay, where they help restore habitat. Tourists do it all the time, wander the streets of a historic town, but this definitely isn't your typical tourist, and everyone's okay with it. The story next. People who walk to work in the morning in Frankfurt, Germany have an unusual companion walking alongside. Meet Jenny, the Arabian Mayor. Now, when this man opens the stable door every morning, Jenny begins her daily walk around the German city. She walks all on her own, along train tracks and by a river, sometimes stopping for snacks. Now everyone seems to know and greet her on the cobbled paths. Even the police appreciate her independent lifestyle. For newcomers who might be confused, Jenny wears a sign on her harness that reads, quote, "My name is Jenny. I didn't run away. I'm just going for a walk. Thank you." Now her owner is not concerned she'll get lost either. At the end of the day, she returns to her stable all on her own. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.